Thank you for joining us here. Beautiful view in the background.
Happy to be here.
We have seen the NFL and the NBA do major media rights deals, getting significant increases in dollars for their teams and owners over the past few years. You guys are up in 2028, but the most recent data point we have for you is ESPN opting out of their Sunday package, saying we're paying too much for this package. So my question for you to start is, are you confident that you can deliver another significant rights fee increase in 2028 when it's your guys' turn?
I am. I think that the key in media negotiations now is having all of your rights available. The ESPN package, while it's a great package, it had a very small piece of playoffs in it. I think you do the best, and I think both the NFL and the NBA have demonstrated this. If you have all of your content, all of your playoffs, all of your regular season available, there will be buyers, and I'm confident that there will be buyers at a higher price for us.
I want to talk about the Sunday package in a second, but let's talk about the big idea here. Can you help explain to me, in your mind, hypothetically at this point, what that 2028 deal may look like? Because, correct me if I'm wrong, the idea here, which would be a little different from what we've seen for football and basketball, is that you would really recreate these packages for whatever media buyers you have out there, right?
Yeah, well, let's start with why, okay? The media environment's changed. Of all of the challenges in that environment, the challenge is the most serious on local, right? Local broadcasts. And the reason for that is that, most of the new entrants, the competitors in the media market, are interested in at least national, if not international rights. So our goal would be to accumulate all of our rights, national and local, go to the table and develop in concert with the potential buyers, packages that are most valuable to them. I think our goals would be to have more national exposure, increase our reach. In addition, we think we have a cluttered environment right now. There's a lot of places you have to go for, if you're a fan of a particular team. And we think that we should strive to create a more fan-friendly environment. People understand better where the games are, kind of a default. My game is always here. Absolutely have to end the blackouts that have plagued us for a really long time.
So what is, from a local standpoint, what do you need to do to get buy-in from all of the teams to say, you know what, it makes sense for us to give our rights to the league so that they can do what they want with them?
The best way to explain it, I think, is that when people speculate about this, they assume we're going to make this media change only, okay? That is really not the case. There is a bigger set of changes involving a larger set of trade-offs between large and small markets that I'm very confident will put us in a position to accomplish what we need to on the media side.
What do you elaborate?
I'm going to be a little limited here, but for example, if in fact you centralize your media and the revenue from those media streams are shared 1/30th, there's much less need for the kind of local revenue sharing system that we have today. And for the large markets whose payments into that system escalate as disparity grows, that's very appealing. It's also very appealing from an incentive perspective because you get rid of what is essentially a 48% marginal tax rate. I don't need to explain to you what marginal tax rates do in terms of your incentives, but it puts a lot of those big market teams in a position to know my other local streams, I'm getting 100-cent dollars. So it's those kinds of trade-offs we're talking about.
So, do you need sort of player buy-in? In other words, does this need to be
some
CBA?
Pieces of it could be subject to bargaining, yeah.
Let's go back to the Sunday package. What's the status of that? Because I know you want to try to wrap up that fairly soon, correct?
Yeah, I remain committed to the idea we need to get it wrapped up. I had a great week of meetings last week. We had multiple bidders in the process. The best I can...
NBC, Apple, ESPN, fair to say?
Yeah, that would be fair to say. And you know, I think the most complicated part of it right now is whether somebody takes all of it or we end up doing a couple of deals. But I am confident we're going to make a deal that will be good for our fans.
And as part of that deal, you guys currently stream games for 5 different major league teams that you control. Would those local rights potentially be a part of that Sunday deal before 2028?
Yeah, it is. I mean, actually, for the 5 teams, we do both the traditional media and their streaming, their digital product. It's possible that those teams could be a piece of what happens going forward.
There seems to be a narrative from the Players Association leaders that a lockout is an inevitability, and you have made some comments that allude to that, like, oh, it's normal, it could be good. So I just want to ask you point blank, is a lockout an inevitability?
So let me say 100%. The owners have not even discussed, let alone decided, that they're going to have a lockout. I answered one question about lockouts. It was a question about the prevalence of the use of the off-season lockout in professional sports generally. I did answer the question by saying it has kind of become the norm, which is factually accurate. Unfortunately, for their own set of reasons, the MLBPA has tried to make more out of that than there is to it.
Is it your intention to push the salary cap for the next collective bargaining agreement?
Let me say this. It's kind of the same answer as the last question. The owners have not decided, voted, reached a consensus on what they're going to propose in the next round of bargaining. I will say this. At the end of the day, sports sell competition. We do have fans in a significant number of our markets who are really concerned about the issue of competitive balance and the competitiveness of the teams in their markets, and it's something we're going to have to pay attention to.
There is an enormous difference in spending between the haves and the have-nots today.
I would agree with that.
I think the concern on the players' end of things may be that they say that may be the case, but the salary cap is not the answer. The answer is a salary floor to push the spending higher of those low teams. Do you agree with that?
You know, it's interesting. I do agree with the idea that a salary floor is an important part of a system. And in fact, every salary cap system also includes a salary floor. Rarely, however, in collective bargaining, do you get a change that goes only one direction.
One more question on this. This issue of a salary cap has come up repeatedly. And the players' union perspective has always been, it's a non-starter. Like, why even bother owners? Don't talk about this because there's just no way we'll give in. How do you manage that?
Look, I think that whatever we propose, whether it's a salary cap or something else, it's incumbent upon us to convince the players that if we're going to change the system, the change will have benefits for everybody. And you know, the adherence to the notion that, or the effort to take a particular issue out of play before we even go to the table, is a unfortunate position that they've taken.
Your ratings are up significantly across the board this year, including, by the way, on all the platforms that you had noted when you guys pulled out of the ESPN deal are shrinking. And so has that made you rethink at all about the value of sort of these legacy media platforms in terms of the future of Major League Baseball?
I think that what you're referring to as the legacy platforms will play an important role in the overall media strategy. I mean, the easiest one to talk about is over the air. I mean, over the air still gives you reach like nobody else, and reach is a really important consideration for us as we make an effort to continue to grow the game.
What do you attribute the spike in ratings to this year?
Look, I think we're putting a better product on the field, number one. I think the rule changes that we implemented a couple of years ago have proved to be durable. The game is faster, more action, more athleticism, all things that when we survey our fans are important to them. That's why we did it. We did it for the fans. Secondly, we've been blessed in terms of influx of talent. You think about it, it's been every single year there is the new phenom, right? I mean, Bobby Witt last year, Cal Raleigh, and then of course, kind of our cornerstones, Aaron Judge and Shohei Ohtani. At the end of the day, it usually begins and ends with the players.
Is there a sort of a unified effort among you guys to take some of these newer stars? Cal Raleigh is a great example because Cal Raleigh is not a household name, and yet he's got 38 home runs at the All-Star break here, one shy of the all-time record at the break from Barry Bonds. How do you make that guy a household name?
We have a really multifaceted program on player marketing that didn't exist 5 years ago. Let me do it as a timeline to begin. We started the combine before the draft, televise it on MLB Network so that people get to know people. The draft, moved it to the All-Star game, used to be just conducted in a conference room, made it a media event so people saw those names. Most of those players will now go to almost exclusively to the minor leagues. We've added minor league games to MLB.TV, again, to drive people's knowledge of those players. And then, the arrival in the big leagues is really an event. It's become a social media event when, for the first time, Alex gets told he's going to be on a major league roster. So that's a piece of it. The second big piece of it is really social media. We have an extensively supported, through a partnership with a company called Greenfly, social media program for our players to make it easy for them to grab clips, add their thoughts when they have, really limited time when you think about our players, right? Because they play every day.
It seems like the NBA has mastered this, right? Where their players seemingly have like free reign on what they say.
Yeah, they have done a good job on the social media side. We think we've made huge strides in the last few years in terms of that presence. And it's not just followers, it's engagement. How much engagement are you getting with that content that you're putting out there? So, you have to work at it. Some of our markets obviously bigger than others and it's easier. But when you have talent like Cal has, people are going to figure out who you are.
For the All-Star game, we're going to see robo umps. Is that the next major rule change?
Yeah, I have a thing about robo umps. The fact of the matter is it's an automated system that helps the umpire. The umpire doesn't become a robot. He's still the man behind the plate that runs the game, but it is a really robust system. There's inherent value in getting calls right, particularly in high leverage situations. And I think one of the beauties of ABS is that it takes virtually no time. I don't know if you've ever seen one, but the challenge happens, the umpire gets the answer in his ear almost immediately, and it doesn't slow the game down.
So no robot umps. Yeah.
Well, because whatever
that would be kind of cool. To have the robot umps. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, that's kind of past me. Although I will say, someone was telling me that the logo painted out here was done almost exclusively without human interaction. They were just, essentially robots that did the painting. So we're going to find a way to...
Robot painters.
Yeah, right.
That's first step into robot umps. Let's talk about expansion.
Okay.
You have thrown out different cities over the years, I feel, on this. And I believe the last comments you made on this was you wanted to at least have a pathway before your contract runs out in 2029. Are we further along in that road in certain extents with certain places?
Well, let me say this. First of all, the cities that are out there almost exclusively have been cities that have self-reported. In other words,
Yes.
they're coming to us saying, we'd like to have
Nashville, Portland.
Yeah, although there's a whole list of them, and I don't like to differentiate between them because we're just not at that point in the process, number one. Number two, I would like to have at least gone through the process and identified cities. They won't be on the field by the time I'm done. I've said that, and I remain committed to that. I think that, you know, the timing has in large measure been dictated by our situation with respect to the Athletics and the Tampa club. The Athletics are resolved. I was out there a couple weeks ago, shovels in the ground. We're going to Vegas, and it's going to be great. Tampa, I'm hopeful that there is a path that will have that resolved.
Are we close to a deal done on Tampa in terms of ownership?
I'm not going to comment on that. That's really for the owner to discuss. I will say this: I am committed to Tampa, and I think there's going to be a resolution that'll make it make sense for everybody to keep it in Tampa.
Hypothetically, would you want 2 new teams?
Yeah, it would have to be 2. Yeah, with the way our schedule works, you have to do 2. And ideally, the only other restriction, ideally you would need an Eastern time zone team and one in the Mountain or the West just to balance.
And have you thought at all about what the expansion fee on that may be? The WNBA just did 3 new teams, $250 million expansion fees. I hear that number. I'm starting to think in the billions for baseball?
Given recent development with respect to franchise values, other places, I would be hesitant to put a number out there because I think it would probably lowball where we'll end up being. It will be a number that begins with a B.
International is sort of a dovetailing off of expansion. Obviously with Shohei Ohtani, that's been huge. I assume as part of the media rights deal, that's going to become a big component of it, where you will sell in international rights potentially to one player. Is that right?
Yeah, historically, we have sold media rights in Japan to a Japanese company. I don't think that happens the next time. I think that it becomes part of a larger package of rights that are sold to a company, one that I alluded to before, one of the types that I alluded to before, that's interested in at least national, if not international rights.
I also want to talk about the potential for a gambling scandal, because we have seen it a little bit in other sports, and most recently with Luis Ortiz and Major League Baseball. I believe that case is still pending, although I don't know, you tell me if there's some sort of resolution.
No, it's pending still. We're still investigating.
Are you concerned that something may happen where things are no longer on the periphery, but you guys actually get rocked by having a major player involved?
Well, I think the way I think about this issue is that you have to begin with the concept of transparency. Prior to the legalization of sports betting, people bet on sports. I know that's a pretty well-known fact. And we had zero information about what was going on with respect to those activities. One of the good things about the legalization of gambling, and not everything about it is good, is that we have partnerships and transparency that allows us to monitor what's going on down to really small bets by individuals not obviously associated with Major League Baseball. That system gives me confidence that we are in a good position to defend the integrity of the game. What happens is it's a factual question as to what happens going forward, but I do think that baseball and all of the major professional sports have taken steps to ensure that in a legalized environment that we did not create, right? The federal government created it, that we're doing everything possible to maintain the integrity of sport, and in a lot of ways have advantages that didn't exist prior to legalization.
You made a decision not too long ago to allow a bunch of people that were caught up in gambling scandals to be now eligible for the Hall of Fame posthumously. Was that a difficult decision for you? This is Pete Rose, Shoeless Joe Jackson.
I got it.
Yeah, no, I know you got it.
Yeah, look, two pieces to that. I think our rules, pretty clear, are designed to protect the integrity of the game. That when someone's alive and the potential for them working in the game still exists, the lifetime ban is the right answer for those people, particularly people that remain involved with gambling even after they've had a problem. Once someone passes away, it just made no sense to me that we're maintaining some sort of a list that says you can't work in the game. No kidding, you're not with us anymore. I mean, it just didn't make a lot of sense. And I thought that some of those players, really not very many, but a few, their place in history really belongs with museums like the Hall of Fame, and they should decide what their place is.
I guess it's obvious we're in Atlanta here for the All-Star game. I guess I maybe should make specific note of that. Are you happy with the weekend in general? Are there little tweaks? I mean, you see how popular like the Savannah Bananas are. Are there things maybe you can borrow from them and integrate it into All-Star Week?
Look, we look at the next week when we're back after 4 really good days here in Atlanta. I mean, for example, our Fan Fest, I got the numbers yesterday. We're up 20% from last year in a smaller space. And it's not like Dallas is a small market, right? I mean, it's another big market. So the weekend continues to get better. And I think it continues to get better because when we go back home next week, we're going to look at the 4 days and figure out what we can add, what we can subtract, what we can do better, and how we can make it a baseball festival for our fans.
Would you consider doing something that now both the NBA and the NHL have done, where it's like, America versus the world?
Yeah, we've had conversations about that over time. There's a history and tradition to American versus national that I do think is significant. That league structure is important to us competitively, and I think widely regarded, our All-Star game, we don't feel quite the need to experiment with the game that maybe some other sports does, because ours is widely regarded to be the best of the All-Star formats.
When do you expect an announcement on the Sunday package?
I think within the next month. I was shooting for the All-Star game. I think we've made really great progress. It could be shorter than that, but we will be done shortly.
The Olympics are coming to Los Angeles in 2028. There has been some talk that maybe Major League Baseball players would be participating in that. Are we close to a resolution there?
Yeah, I think that's a this year resolution issue. I do think, Casey Wasserman, the head of LA 2028, came in, spoke to our owners, made a really compelling case for the idea that LA 2028 presented a nice marketing opportunity for us. When you have an everyday sport, taking a break is a challenge. There are challenges that need to be addressed, but it is under active consideration.
Just hypothetically, would you consider taking a break entirely from the sport rather than, because you wouldn't keep playing games with certain players away, or would you?
I would get strung up if I tried to pull that one up.
Exactly.
I mean, either the teams are going to play at full strength or they're not going to play. Yeah, I think you take that as a given.
Another thing that I have seen anecdotally, but I'm sure you have full stats on it, is that it seems to me that Little League Baseball has come back. I mean, even from like 5 years ago with my kids, it seemed like, some kids played, some kids didn't. Now, like every kid in my town again plays Little League Baseball. Is that attributable to Major League Baseball's efforts?
Well, I think a lot of it is attributable to Major League Baseball's efforts. We have a great partnership with Little League. I think the Little League Classic puts a highlight on youth play on national television in a way that, no other sport has. We started out at the beginning of my first term, really based on some important research that playing as a kid is one of the most important determinants of whether you are a fan and how big a fan you are as an adult. And you don't have to play all the way till you're 25 years old. I mean, 12 kind of gets it done for you. So we have invested heavily in youth participation. We have a whole department that didn't exist 10 years ago. Surrounding the All-Star game, I was out yesterday, saw a tournament of softball and baseball teams sponsored by our teams around the country that we bring in here to play at the All-Star game. The nice thing about our youth programming, we can measure the return on an investment, and we are now, once again, the fastest growing sport among the four majors.
Yeah, that's amazing, right? Because the reputation is that it's all old people and the demographics that like baseball.
And it shows up. It's showing up already in the demographics on our broadcasts. We were up double digits, 18 to 34, on every platform last year.
Yeah. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.